A big talking point in the FNaF community over the past couple months has been MatPat's Five Nights at Freddy's timeline. I think his timeline was good, but there's a lot of things that I disagree with. In the future I will be making a video going over everything I do disagree with and why, but in this video I'm going to be doing something similar, but also different. I'm going to be doing a 3-part series on my own FNaF timeline. I made a FNaF timeline back in August of 2022 and planned to do a part 2 discussing the Pizzaplex era, but with MatPat's timeline I felt I had to explain all of my points regarding what I believe and why I believe it, and I've also changed my opinions a bit, so I'm going to be restarting. This will be my first of the 3 timeline videos. What MatPat did in his video is he explained how it would work narratively and then explained what he felt needed explaining, but I think it makes more sense to first explain everything before you do the narrative, so that people know where you're coming from, and then explain it narratively at the end. So that's what I will be doing. These are probably going to be 3 decently long videos. This ended up being almost a 10-page script, so strap in, and let's get started on the origins of the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline. I think the first thing to talk about is something that a lot of people have been changing their minds on recently, especially since Squawks made a video on it and then MatPat adopted the idea as well, and of course I'm talking about Midnight Motorist. The bigger idea recently has been that the kid that runs away in Midnight Motorist is actually Michael Laughton and not the bite victim like most people have believed. However, I don't think that this is the case. The main evidence for this comes from a few things. First, people argue that the person on the couch defends the runaway and also seems demanding to William, which supposedly contradicts Michael, as he bullies his younger brother, and if he spoke in a demanding tone to his father, he'd probably get his ass kicked. People also argue that Crying Child is a little kid and probably couldn't break the window, and some people also say that if the bite victim was the runaway, then that would place Charlotte's death before the bite victim, which would lead to a lack of motivation for William. But there's problems with all of this. First of all, just because Michael bullies his younger brother doesn't mean he doesn't care about him. Take a look at Step Closer, which literally has an older brother hating having to take care of his younger brother and bullying and scaring him, but the story also shows that they have an unbreakable brotherly bond. A lot of older siblings have this way of thinking that basically means that no one is allowed to make fun of their younger sibling except them. I'm the youngest child in my family, and my brother and sister don't really look after me because I'm tall and fat, so no one messes with me, or I just sit on them, so I don't have any reason to be looked after. But it happens with a lot of siblings. It's just how it works. There's these moments all the time where me and my brother are angry at each other, and then we're best friends 2 minutes later. The argument of the couch potato speaking to William in a more demanding tone also isn't very strong, as Michael is often ignored by his father completely. So it doesn't really matter what tone Michael uses because William will just brush past it anyway. And he literally does. The couch potato tells him to leave the runaway alone, and William straight up doesn't listen. And even if he did, William is drunk. What's he gonna do, a GTA punch? The argument of the bite victim not being able to break the window isn't strong either, because while he is a young kid, probably around 6 by this point, it's just glass. He could probably break it. Hell, stories like The Real Jake and You're the Band, both of which I'll talk about in a second, show these little kids with baseball bats in their rooms. It's entirely possible that the bite victim has something in his room, maybe not a baseball bat, but possibly just something in his room that's hard enough for him to break the window. Plus, it's possible that it wasn't him, but the being outside his window that broke the window. And finally, there's the argument that if Crying Child was killed after Charlotte, then William just wouldn't have any motivation. But that's assuming that his motivation has anything to do with his kids in the first place. Sure, he must have a motivation of some kind, but nothing actually suggests that it's because of his children dying. And Charlie dying before the bite victim is already extremely likely because of the Fredbear plushie. For the first few FNaF 4 minigames, I think it's very likely that William Afton is the Fredbear plushie, which is heavily implied by the real Jake, but in the final minigame, the text color of the Fredbear plushie changes, indicating it's someone different. Many people believe that it's actually William in the final minigame, but that doesn't make sense. The main evidence for this comes from Michael saying that he put Elizabeth back together just like William asked him to, and a FNaF 3 Springtrap teaser saying, "I'm still here," just like the final speaker does. But that's kind of it. But why would William say these things like, "We are still your friends"? That doesn't really make sense. And while yeah, they say pretty similar things as each other, they don't say exactly the same thing. And I know that sounds like cherry picking, but it's not, because saying similar things is not as good of evidence as saying literally the exact same things. Let's look over at FNaF World, where we have the glitch Fredbear who sets up Happiest Day. FNaF 3 confirms that the puppet sets up Happiest Day. FNaF 3 confirms that the puppet sets up Happiest Day, meaning that if Glitch Bear set up Happiest Day, then he must be the puppet as well. But the Glitch Bear at the same time is actually the Fredbear plushie. Aside from the essentially same design, the Glitch Bear says exactly the same things as the FNaF 4 final speaker. The Glitch Bear is the final speaker, in turn meaning the puppet is the final speaker. Need more proof? The way we find the Glitch Bear's messages is by sitting on the final screen of Adventure Fredbear before he glitches out and transforms into Glitch Bear. Sound familiar? Adventure Fredbear is being controlled by Anim Dude, who is pulling the strings and manipulating us. Now ask yourself, who in the FNaF series is the most manipulative character? Right. And then it switches to the glitch Fredbear, who looks and speaks like the final speaker. It starts off as a William Afton-esque character and becomes the final speaker. And what does Glitch Bear tell us to do? Collect clocks to set up Happiest Day. Clocks. Now, I want you to ask yourself, what is the name of the puppet's music box song? Don't know? It's called My Grandfather's Clock. And I think it's very clear. Charlotte is the Fredbear plush, meaning that she died before the bite victim does, which means that the bite victim has to be the runaway. The real Jake and You're the Band also support this. Jake is a young boy with a brain tumor which ultimately kills him, connecting to the bite victim dying from a bite to the head. He is spoken to by a doll, whom he speaks back to, just like the Fredbear plush, and right before Jake dies, he is spoken to by an entity making whisper sounds, connecting to the final FNaF 4 minigame and the Fredbear plush. And these whisper sounds are also made in the 7th Phasma Frights epilogue coming out of an evidence bag. And what's in this bag? The puppet. Jake is a character that is clearly meant to be associated with the bite victim, and there's a point in the real Jake where Jake is approached by his friend at the window who convinces him to try and sneak out through his window to go to the arcade, just like the runaway who sneaks out of his house from the window to go to Fredbear's or Freddy's. But You're the Band is even more interesting. Timmy is obsessed with Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and he even has a birthday in the story. Shortly before the climax of the story, Timmy escapes out his window to go to Freddy's, and he is led there by an entity that was outside his window. And right after, we meet Michael, who is trying to look after Timmy, just like the guy on the couch in Midnight Motorist. Admittedly, that last part is a bit of a stretch, but everything else is pretty clear to me. The bite victim is the runaway, but he doesn't run away from the thing outside his window in fear. No, he is lured away by it. Think again about You're the Band. Timmy is led away by a shadow being. A shadow. Now, if we go back to Midnight Motorist, we see footprints in the mud, but we only see one pair of footprints. None leading up to the window and none leading away. It's almost as if the footprints just appeared out of nowhere. What if the thing outside the window was actually Shadow Freddy? Shadow Freddy assists William in luring the animatronics to the safe room in FNaF 3, and Henry in FNaF 6 refers to that as a trap. In the FNaF 4 files, Nightmare, who is a completely black and see-through version of Fredbear, is referred to as Shadow Freddy. In Ultimate Custom Night, Nightmare says to William that he is his wickedness made of flesh. Hide and Seek has Shadow Bonnie be created by Toby's anger, and over time he grows sharp teeth and claws just like Nightmare has. All of this indicates that Shadow Freddy was created from the powerful negative emotions, primarily anger, from William Afton. In Ultimate Custom Night, the Toy Chica High School cutscenes are heavily associated with William's victims, and one of them mentions Toy Chica going to her victim's window to find them. These Toy Chica cutscenes show William having 7 victims, and the FNaF World Update 2 map has 7 graves on it. But 6 of these graves are next to Purple Guy, indicating they're kids he killed, and the 7th is completely separate, closer to Fredbear than Purple Guy. This indicates that the 7th victim was a victim of William, but was more of an indirect kill. What if Shadow Freddy was the entity that was outside the bite victim's window, leading him to Fredbear's where he found Charlotte's dead body? This is what sparked his fear of the animatronics. Remember that hint Scott gave us back in the FNaF 4 days? What is seen in shadows is easily misunderstood in the mind of a child. Maybe the bite victim thought the character was Fredbear, his favorite character, just in the shadows, making it difficult to see what he actually was. The fear of animatronics is caused by Shadow Freddy, a being created by William's anger, and this fear of animatronics is what causes Michael to stuff him into Fredbear's mouth, leading to the bite of 83 and the crying child's death, making William indirectly responsible and deeming the bite victim one of his victims. It's very likely that William's anger actually created Shadow Freddy as a result of him killing Charlotte, as he appears to the bite victim the very night that Charlotte is killed, and there's clearly at least a few hours of a gap between Charlotte's death and Midnight Motorist, since Charlotte dies when the restaurant is still open, open, and Midnight Motorist is at midnight for obvious reasons. That makes it possible that Shadow Freddy was created when Charlotte died and appeared to the bite victim before William got home. However, in FNaF world there is a character named Red Bear, which is an obvious reference to Fredbear. Shadow Freddy and Red Bear are the same thing, just differently colored. They also have broken jaws, likely alluding to the bite. During the universe end, Fredbear convulses with the same broken jaw design. Nightmare is a recolored Nightmare Fredbear, and whenever Shadow Freddy appears, his design is always matching that of Golden Freddy. He does in FNaF 4, like I just said. He has the same design as Withered Golden Freddy in FNaF 2, and looks like regular Freddy in Follow Me, which is after FNaF 1 when Golden Freddy also looks like regular Freddy. Fredbear in Ultimate Custom Night is also shown with a render in the shadows. Shadow Freddy is heavily associated with Fredbear and the Bite of 83, which is strange due to his creation likely being before the bite. What I think this means is something similar to what we see in Hide and Seek, where the anger is built up over time and fuels the shadow more and more. Shadow Freddy was created from William's negative emotions in killing Charlotte, and he was further fueled by the Bite of 83. Something I've touched on a little bit here is that Charlotte died at Fredbear's family diner. However, many people believe that she died at Freddy's instead. So why do I think that she died at Fredbear's? Well, her death being at Fredbear's in the novel trilogy is certainly a big factor. The Freddy animatronic in Take Cake from FNaF 2 is brown, but at the same time, we hadn't seen anything of Fredbear's at that time. Fredbear's was first mentioned in FNaF 2, and Charlotte is the first murder of the series, and we see it happen in FNaF 2. This logic connects the two together, and it matches how both take place in a small location. The Freddy in Take Cake is also holding a cake, which is what Chica is meant to do at Freddy's, indicating that this is not Freddy's. There's also the scoop from Felix the Shark, which has Stevie, a kid heavily associated with the Fredbear plushie, and he constantly follows Mandy around, watching her. There's a scene in the story where Mandy runs away from Stevie only to find him standing in the direction that she ran to. Just like how in FNaF 4, no matter where we go, the Fredbear plushie is always around watching us, following us. Stevie died at Sideshow Snack Shack, a literal family diner with a bear animatronic as the mascot. As I said earlier, the Fredbear plushie is Charlie, and Stevie represents the Fredbear plush, so him dying at what is clearly a Fredbear's family diner equivalent implies that Charlotte died at Fredbear's as well. Next up, we have to talk about Mrs. Afton. What exactly is her role in the series? I think there's actually two different Mrs. Aftons, and the reason for this is actually eye color. Eye color is genetic. To have blue eyes or green eyes, for example, you have to have a parent with that eye color. Michael Afton has blue eyes, as we see in the Sister Location Custom Night cutscenes. The FNaF Character Encyclopedia shows us art for the bite victim which depicts him with brown eyes. This would mean that one parent would have to have blue eyes, while the other would have to have brown. William is likely the one with the blue eyes, as Michael and William are said to look very alike. But then, how does Elizabeth have green eyes? That would imply that she was born to a different mother than the other two. Stories like The Real Jake and The Cliffs have kids that are associated with the bite victim who have a mother that died before the events of the story, so it's possible that William lost his wife but then remarried and had another child, who ended up being Elizabeth. It's also possible that she died in childbirth for the bite victim, like Tyler's mom in The Cliffs. It could give a good explanation for why Michael often takes out his anger on his brother, though that's just speculation. I just think it's likely that the original Mrs. Afton died, then William remarries and the bite victim dies, and he dives deeper into his work. His new wife notices this. He's hiding inside his walls now that his son's room is empty, an empty tomb for his now dead son.
Why do you hide inside your walls when there is music in my halls? All I see is an empty room, no more joy, an empty tomb.
It's not exactly grief, but more so just anger, but this is something that'll have to be continued in the next timeline video. However, William's wife dying could provide an explanation for his motivations. In Bunny Call, we have Bob, a man with a wife and 3 kids. 2 boys and 1 girl. He is quite distant from his family, and while he does care for them, he feels like they don't appreciate him. Sound familiar? This is telling us the relationship that William has with his family. He cares about his family, but not in the traditional sense. Midnight Motorist has him screaming at his son. The Immortal and the Restless depicts Michael as being completely ignored by William, and the Fourth Closet has William physically abuse Elizabeth. He's not the best father, but at the same time, he cares? That doesn't exactly make the most sense if he cares in the traditional sense that a father cares. A good explanation for this is provided by the Stitchwraith Singers and the Silver Eyes trilogy. In the 9th Stitch Race Stinger, Eleanor, a character with connections to Circus Baby including her design, actions, and the character encyclopedia grouping her along with the other Circus Baby animatronics, poses as the daughter of Dr. Talbert. Talbert is a scientist who had a partner whom he broke off from a long time ago, and he also has experiments with Remnant. Talbert is essentially a less murderous iteration of William Afton. What's interesting about this is that Talbert's wife died, which caused him to be a much less pleasant man to be around, and also caused him to dive deep into his work. What this implies is that the death of his wife is what caused William's downward spiral. The Silver Eyes trilogy explains to us that William Afton is actually jealous of Henry's success, which is what contributed to his murder spree. What if after William's wife died, his family was broken, while Henry's was perfect with a living wife and children? A happy family, and William couldn't stand to allow Henry to be better than him. It's his psychotic need to make Henry suffer the same way that his family suffered. William's family is broken, so therefore Henry's must be as well. So, William kills Henry's daughter. Think of it like this. William is in the public eye, and he wants to be respected. A wife and children shows good status, but a broken family to William would shatter his public image. He cares about his family, but mostly to the extent that it makes him look good, and when he loses that, he erupts in anger. Moving on from William's motivation though, let's talk about the FNAF 4 nightmares. It's been confirmed by the FNAF 1 phone call, the similar gameplay to FNAF 1, and Michael drawing Nightmare Fredbear that the player of FNAF 4 is Michael Afton. However, he claims in the survival logbook that the experiences he has are dreams, but the Sister Location Breaker Room map shows dots in the place where every animatronic appears on the FNAF 4 nights, confirming that the Nightmare animatronics are real. Nightmare Fredbear in Ultimate Custom Night tells William,
"This time, there is more than an illusion to fear."
When you shine your light on Fredbear, if he's in the closet or on the bed, a sound effect is created that is like a high-pitched ringing noise, just like the sound the illusion discs emit. When Foxy is in the closet, his most docile state is as a Foxy plushie. Nightmare Freddy appears on the bed where there is a Freddy plushie. The Nightmare animatronics are not real animatronics, they're the Bite Victims plushies with illusion discs inside them, only creating the illusion of Nightmare animatronics and the illusion of movement. In reality, they're stationary. Also notice how the Foxy plushie still has his head. Taking into account the missing hat on the Foxy plush in the FNAF 4 minigames, which Michael wears around the house, the Nightmare experiences must take place before the Bite of 83. In Midnight Motorist, William claims that the Bite Victim will be sorry when he comes back. It could be that he wants to experiment with the illusion discs and does so on the Bite Victim as punishment for sneaking out. In the art for the Bite Victim in the FNAF character encyclopedia, we also see that he has bags under his eyes, indicating that he hasn't gotten much sleep, indicating he's been forced to stay awake at night because he's defending himself from all the Nightmare animatronics all night long. The character encyclopedia also tells us that the crying child is the one to face the Nightmare animatronics, indicating that he faces the nightmares and later inflicts the same nightmares onto Michael, but we'll expand on that in the next timeline video. And the last thing we have to talk about is the missing children incident. I've made an entire video on this topic which I still stand by, but basically I believe that the missing children incident happened in 1985. I have a few reasons for this. First is the fact that the Springlock animatronics are already shut down by the time the missing children incident happens, as we learned from FNAF 3, and the spring suits are not yet shut down in FNAF 4. The Silver Eyes and Into the Pit are big contributors as well. In the Silver Eyes, William Afton gets Springlocked, which leads to him becoming Springtrap soon after. The book takes place in 1995. I believe the Follow Me minigames to take place after the events of FNAF 1, which I'll discuss further in the next timeline video. However, the minigames also cannot be within the same year of FNAF 1, because the building is very clearly already shut down in Follow Me, and it seems to have been that way for quite a while. FNAF 1 takes place in 1993, another thing I'll talk about in the next video, and the newspapers from FNAF 1 claim the building will close by year's end. That leaves no time for the Follow Me minigames to take place in 1993 as well, which would push it forward to at least 1994, but that date is never used anywhere in the series. 1995 is, however, and that's when William gets Springlocked in the Silver Eyes, telling us that that's also when he gets Springlocked in the games as well. This tells us that the novel trilogy's basic timeline does run in tandem with the games, also including Charlotte's death in 1983 and 2 years before the missing children incident, and it has the missing children incident 10 years before Afton gets Springlocked. The games would very likely follow this as well, which would place the missing children incident in 1985. There's also Into the Pit, and while this event is very different to the missing children incident, possibly to allude to the Save Them murders from FNAF 2, it is still primarily about the original missing children incident. The graphic novel also confirms this by having the name Susie be used for one of the missing kids, which is of course the name of the victim who possesses Chica. While the art in the graphic novel isn't the best source of evidence, the dialogue is all provided, meaning that it is canon and can be used as evidence. And of course, Into the Pit takes place in 1985. Going back to the novel trilogy though, the books tell us that William Afton is actually the one who stuffed the kids, not the puppet as Give Gifts Give Life would lead you to believe. It's more likely that the minigame is just trying to give a representation of the puppet guiding the spirits. Some people argue that the novel trilogy is a universe where the puppet does not exist, but why would William's method of murdering the kids be any different? We're told that the children died inside the animatronics. They weren't killed and then hidden inside the animatronics, they were stuffed into the animatronics as they were still alive, which is what killed them. As we learned from Phone Guy all the way back in FNaF 1, the animatronics are filled with electronic wires that would kill you if you were stuffed inside. The fact that this is even mentioned clearly screams that the kids died from those wires, and that's what happens in the Silver Eyes trilogy. So why would William's murder method be any different? And things like Pizza Party and Toy Chica the High School Years depict the murders as not being continuous and then grouped together before being stuffed, but rather being stuffed as each individual kid was killed. So, there you have it. William stuffs the kids into the animatronics. And that's actually everything that there is to talk about evidence-wise. I know this is a really long video already, but with all the pieces in place, let's put them all together in a narrative format. I should say before we begin that I'll be referring to the bite victim as Evan, just as a filler name, despite the fact that I don't really believe that to be his name, so just keep that in mind, and let's get started with a narrative format. William Afton owns a business with his partner Henry Emily. This business is a company called Fazbear Entertainment, starting off as just a show with a guy dancing in a bear costume, which quickly transitioned into a company owning restaurants, particularly a diner called Fredbear's Family Diner, a location with a yellow bear and a rabbit named Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. These were animatronics that could switch between being robots and being costumes that people could wear. William had a family with a wife and 2 children, Michael and Evan. William had quite strange feelings about his family. He often felt like they didn't appreciate him as much as they should, and he felt more attracted to his business than his family. He was more concerned with keeping up appearances, having a wife and children like a normal man, but eventually his wife died. This drove William just a little bit insane, as not only would his family not be perfect anymore, he worried this would be furthered if his children suffered the same fate. He put a lot of emphasis on protecting his young child, ignoring Michael and focusing on Evan. He managed to remarry, but the scars were already there. The anger was already fused to him, and the family was already broken. But one thing that stuck out to him was his business partner. Henry had a perfect family, a wife, twin boy and girl, happy. It was jarring. William's family was broken while Henry's was perfect. William drove himself into a drunken mess of a man. His anger became a giant heap, a massive pool of pure rage and anguish, so much so that Henry realized William's anger and built a security puppet animatronic to keep his daughter safe. But this didn't stop William, who drove all the way to Fredbear's Family Diner, finding Charlotte, Henry's daughter, outside the window. This was his opportunity to inflict the pain of his own onto Henry, to ruin Henry's family just as William's family was ruined. The security puppet tried to help, but the same bullies that had locked Charlotte outside of the restaurant had trapped the puppet in its music box. It managed to escape the box, but not before it was too late. William had gotten his revenge. Little did he know he left a being made purely of his rage in the wake of Charlie's murder. Back at home, this being reached Evan's window. With the dark shadows and rain outside, Evan didn't realize what the being was. He believed it was Fredbear, his favorite Fazbear Entertainment character, and he was beckoning for him to follow. And he did. He followed him all the way to Fredbear's Family Diner. Evan often snuck out at night to go to Fredbear's, but this was different. His favorite character was telling him to follow, and so he did. But what he found in the alley of Fredbear's was the body of his friend, Charlotte, dead in the rain, with the security puppet lying next to her. William finds him gone and claims that Evan will be sorry when he gets back home. Following Charlotte's death, Henry had been driven into a spiral, unable to be with his wife and son. William killing Charlotte had worked. It broke Henry's family. Henry couldn't stand losing his daughter, so he created technology to warp the world around him. Technology that would create such a high-pitched sound that your brain couldn't process the things around you, causing you to see what you would expect to see. And when he used them, the Ella doll that he made for Charlie when she was a little girl reflected Charlotte herself. Henry wanted to raise Ella as if she was Charlie, creating robots of Charlie to allow her to grow up like a normal girl, But then he noticed something before he started the project. The security puppet animatronic had recently been moving quite strangely, almost like it was possessed. Henry thought back to where Charlotte's body had been found, outside in the rain, with the security puppet, circuits fried, lying down next to her. Somehow, Charlotte's spirit has made its way into the security puppet. Afton doesn't realize this until a while later, but what he does notice is the technology that Henry created to warp the world around him, the illusion discs. William steals this technology, and to experiment with it, he puts the illusion discs into Evan's plushies, and as punishment for sneaking out, he places Evan into another house he owns and sets up the plushies all around. Evan had to face off against nightmarish experiences with Freddy Krueger-looking Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Fredbear animatronics. But in reality, they were just plushies, with illusion discs, causing Evan to perceive them as nightmare animatronics trying to kill him. The illusion discs were a success. However, these nightmare experiences worked in tandem with the Shadow Freddy that he saw to make Evan terrified of the animatronics. He still loved the characters, but he was afraid of the animatronics. Michael noticed this fear, and to troll him, he ripped off the plush Foxy head and wore it around the house to joke around with his brother. Think about it from his perspective. Even from birth, Michael was constantly ignored by his father, but when his brother is born, he gets much more attention. Whether or not it is good attention is up for debate, probably a little bit of both, but Michael is never the one getting it. His father straight up doesn't care about him, and he takes that anger out on the brother that steals the attention. He does envy his brother, but he also does love his brother and has to take care of him on his own as William becomes an alcoholic. It's all up to Michael to take care of his brother, and while he loves his brother, he hates having to babysit him. So, he just tries to scare him. A little taste of revenge. He dresses up as Foxy, constantly scaring his brother, and also locks him in his room. William watched Evan through his plush of Fredbear, also speaking to him through it to give the illusion of an imaginary friend. Evan was essentially seen as a crybaby by a lot of the neighborhood, and he kind of was. He could never even go near the animatronics, and the kids around made fun of him for it, including Michael. At his birthday party, he tried so hard to stay away from the animatronics, but Michael had different plans. Michael and his 3 friends, all wearing Fazbear character masks, ganged up on Evan, bringing him over to the Fredbear animatronic. Evan squirmed the whole way there, trying to break free, but he was shoved into the mouth of Fredbear. What Michael didn't account for was the pressure and moisture that caused the mouth to snap shut, crushing Evan's head inside, killing him. The Shadow Freddy that Evan had seen was fueled with more power as the animatronic he was created based on created a high quantity of agony and fear, fueling the monster. The spirit of Charlotte appeared to Evan in his final moments, appearing to him in a form that he trusts, the Fredbear plushie. She tells him that she will put him back together, but that bridge is crossed at a later date. 2 years have passed. Michael and William still live together, but in a different house than they did back in 1983. The same house that Evan was facing the nightmare animatronics inside, but Mike obviously didn't know that. Michael and William's relationship was rocky to say the least, but they still lived together. Michael now had a 2-year-old sister named Elizabeth, who had been born shortly after Michael lost his brother. Michael knew he had messed up with the bite of 1983, and his relationship with his father was even worse than it was before. However, he was still eager to make his father proud, believing that he was a good man. It is now 1985. Fredbear's Family Diner closed down after the events of the bite in 1983. But Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was thriving. It was a hotspot for kids' birthday parties, and everyone loved it. The puppet animatronic had been moved there as well, no longer a security device, and instead was there to give out gifts to the children. But William noticed something strange about it. The puppet moved around strangely at night. Sometimes the animatronics would move around, but the puppet did so in a very strange way. William thought back to the way that Charlotte's dead body had been found. Lying next to it had been the security puppet. Although it sounded crazy, William realized what Henry had realized so long ago. Charlotte's spirit had made its way into the puppet. He also thought back to what Evan had told him as the Fredbear plush. He had seen something outside his window, a dark iteration of Fredbear. William knew that wasn't him, so who could it be? Coincidentally, it was the same night that he killed Charlotte. It was almost like her death had kickstarted a slew of paranormal events. The creation of Shadow Freddy, as well as the possession of the puppet. With the puppet being next to Charlotte's dead body and the puppet being seemingly possessed by her now, he theorized that the spirit could either follow whatever is nearby on their death, whatever caused the pain of their death, or a mixture of both. The spirit follows the flesh, it would seem, and also the pain, but he needed to test his theory. Fast forward to June 26th, 1985. William Afton goes to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and finds a young girl named Susie, who seemed upset. Using the Spring Bonnie suit, which had originally been a performer at Freddy's but was locked up along with Golden Freddy after the 1983 bite, William wore the Springlock suit and approached the girl. Susie's dog had recently been hit by a car. Afton took this opportunity to tell her that it wasn't true and that her dog was actually nearby, telling her that he would take her to him. She followed him, and from there, it was too easy. He lured her to the safe room and locked her inside, waiting until the building closed for the night. Susie was locked in the safe room for hours until finally, everything in the building was still. Her fear was building, and William brought the Chica animatronic into the safe room, grabbed Susie, and stuffed her inside. She tried to resist, but she was powerless. The wires inside the animatronic zapped the little girl and killed her inside the animatronic. If William was right, the spirit would follow the flesh, and also the pain. If he was right, the spirit of Susie would possess the Chica animatronic that she had died in. But is he correct? Soon enough, he would find out. But he realized that for his plan to work, he would need more. He would need to kill more kids. Excluding the one that he himself wore, there were 5 total animatronics. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Golden Freddy. Chica was done. There were 4 animatronics left. Bonnie would be next, then Freddy, then Foxy, and then Golden Freddy. 1 down, 4 to go. But that's the end of part 1 of my FNaF timeline. I hope you guys enjoyed, and let me know what you think about the theory. Some of this is fabricated for the sake of keeping it narrative. It's kind of just inferences, and I think the way that I presented this makes a lot of sense. However, if you do disagree with some of the things I brought up in this video, let me know what and why. Of course, this is just a FNaF timeline, and no one is going to agree with everything that I talked about in this video, just like MatPat's timeline, and that's okay. For instance, you may have noticed that in my timeline at this point, Elizabeth isn't actually born until after the Bite of 83, hence the empty girl's bedroom, because it is going to be her room, but she isn't alive yet to be in there. But I also didn't go over why I didn't have her be born yet, because Elizabeth's story isn't relevant until the second part of the timeline. So you'll just have to wait until next time to find out why. So let me know in the comments what you guys think of the timeline so far, and stay tuned for the next 2 parts. But if you did enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye guys!